In this lecture, we're going to talk about multiplying polynomials together. Before we do any examples, I want to talk about this word right here. Okay. This just means we have some expression that has variables and numbers. So these are some examples of a polynomial. Okay. So polynomials, again, just means you've got variables and numbers combined into one expression. Okay. Now, there's a mnemonic that you may or may not remember called FOIL. So I'm going to go to the next slide because it kind of details what that stands for. So FOIL stands for first, outside, inside, last. So when we are given two polynomials, so we have x plus 5 being multiplied by x minus 1. Okay. To work through that and make sure we don't miss anything, okay, that's where that mnemonic comes in handy. All right, because it wants us to take the first term, okay, in our first grouping, so the x, and multiply it by the first term in that second grouping. So x times x is going to give me x squared, okay? Because again, you can think about each of these as having an exponent of 1, okay? 1 plus 1 is going to give you that 2. So then if you look at the next one, okay, we take our first term, we take what's called our outside. So it's outside because it's all the way on the left, and then we take the value all the way over on the right. Okay, that's the outside. And if we multiply x times -1, that gives us -1x. Okay. Then we look at the inside. So my inside term is a positive 5, and I'm going to multiply that by x. So that's where this plus 5x comes from. Then I have my last term, so the last term in each grouping. So a positive 5 times a -1 is going to give me that -5. So that's what that stands for. Okay, that's what FOIL stands for. That's where all of those values then come from when we multiply it out. So you can also think about this as like a double distribution. Okay, so we're taking the x, we're distributing it to both terms in the second grouping, and then we're taking the 5, distributing it to both terms in the second grouping. Okay. Now, we are not done with our answer when we get to this step, okay? We have one more step to go, and we want to combine like terms. So if I look at my like terms, I have a -1x and a positive 5x. So when I combine those, I get a positive 4x. And so that is my final answer for this example. So we're going to take what we just learned and we're going to apply that to the next problem. So for this problem, okay, we'll start by doing our first term times our first term. So x times x is going to give me x squared. Then I'm going to do my outside times outside. So x times 6 is going to give me a positive 6x. Then I look at my two terms on the inside. So it's 3 times x. So I get a positive 3x. And then I take my last times my last. So a positive 3 times a positive 6 is going to give me a positive 18. Okay, and now that I'm here, I've multiplied it out. Okay, I can combine my like terms. Okay. So when I combine my like terms here, I'm going to bring down that x squared because nothing combines with it. And then I've got a positive 6 and a positive 3x. So I'm just going to take my 6 and combine it with my 3 to give me a positive 9x. And then bring down the positive 18. And I've got my answer. So that is multiplying two. We call these binomials, okay, because they're a polynomial with two terms, okay? So that is multiplying two binomials together. All right, let's look at another example. So these two examples look a little bit different from the last slide, okay? Because it's not just a variable plus a number, okay? We've got a number now in front of our variable. But the process doesn't change, even though the problem looks a little bit more challenging because it's got a little bit more going on. So for this second one, okay, we're going to keep that same process. So I'm going to start by multiplying my first term times my first term. So that'll give me 3x. And again, I can put in a 1 here if that's useful for y'all. So 1 plus 1 is going to give me 2. Okay, you can think about it as I'm combining an x with an x. I'm going to get 2 x's at the end. So my exponent is 2. Okay. Then I look at my outside terms. So if I combine my outside terms, I've got a positive 3 times a negative 2. That'll give me a negative 6. And then there's no x on that 2. So I can just bring down the x. Then I look at my inside terms. And if I combine these, again, I've got a number combined with a variable. So this just becomes positive 5x. And then lastly, I take my last term times my last term. So positive 5 times a negative 2 is going to give me a negative 10. Okay. So that is step 1. I've multiplied everything out. Now step 2, I need to combine my like terms. And again, my like terms are these terms with the x's. So I'm going to bring down 3x squared. And then I've got a negative 6x and a positive 5x. So when I take negative 6 plus 5, that's going to give me a negative 1x. And I can bring down that negative 10. Now, when something is a negative 1x, we could also write it like this. Okay? So either or. Okay, whichever you prefer. You can write the 1 in front of the x, or you cannot write it. The implication here is that there is a 1 in front of that x. Okay, so again, you can write the 1 or you cannot write the 1. It's going to be totally personal preference for you guys. Okay. So I want you guys to try number 3 on your own. Okay, so take what we just done. Okay, try number 3. Okay, so for this one, as you went through it, okay, you should have started by doing 2y times 3y. So you have 2 times 3 gives you a positive 6, and then the y times y gives you that y squared. Then you moved on to the outside. That gave you that negative 12y. And then if we look on the inside, negative 14 times a positive 3 gives you a negative 42. And then again, it has a y as well. And then the last thing, oh, let me change my color. Negative 14 times a negative 6. So again, a negative times a negative gives us a positive. 14 times 6 gives us 84. Okay. And then we just have some like terms to combine. So that negative 12 minus 42 gives me that negative 54y in the middle. So that is example 3. So we're now going to look at a different way of writing, okay, multiplication of polynomials. So anything squared, let's talk about it. If I have 3 squared, okay, that is the same thing as saying 3 times 3. Okay. So if I have 6w minus 4 squared, that is the same thing as saying 6w minus 4 times 6w minus 4. So we just can rewrite it. Okay, I highly recommend rewriting this out and expanding it and writing it as 2 terms. Okay, because then it's going to make that process of FOIL much easier. So we'll just go through the FOIL process like we did in the last examples. So 6 times 6 gives me 36, and then w times w gives me w squared. Okay. My outside terms multiplied together gives me a negative 24w. Okay. And then again, negative 4 times 6 is going to give me a negative 24w. And then my last times my last, negative 4 times negative 4 is going to give me a positive 16. Okay. And then my like terms that I combine here again is going to be these two middle terms. So hopefully you've noticed a pattern, okay, that when we do FOIL, and if you've got the same exponent, so here we have an exponent of 1 on both of these, and we don't have an exponent in the second term, okay, we're always going to end up with two middle terms that we can combine, okay? So just something to know that that pattern stays consistent. So when I combine my two middle terms, I'm going to take the negative 24 minus 24. Okay, that'll be negative 48W, and then I need to also bring down that plus 16. So that is that example. So again, it ended up becoming exactly like the previous problems. It just initially looked a little bit different. So I want you guys to try number 5 on your own. So hopefully for this one, you got x squared minus 14x plus 49 is your final answer. Okay, so when you did this one, I highly recommend rewrite it as x times 7. I'm sorry, x minus 7 times x minus 7. And then first times first gives you x squared. Your outside multiplied together gives you a negative 7x. Your inside terms multiplied together gives you a negative 7x. And then your last two terms multiplied together gives you a positive 49. And then you combine your like terms and you've got your final answer. Okay. So now instead of doing something with two terms times something with two terms, we're going to level it up a little bit and take something with two terms times something with three terms. Now, there is no fun mnemonic for this one. Okay. So you just have to remember the process on your own. But the process is going to be the same, okay? So if I think about, and I'm going to go back a slide really quick. If I think about these problems, I took this x and I distributed it to both terms in my second pair. So I'm going to do that process over here, okay? I just, instead of distributing it to two terms, I have to distribute my x to three terms. Okay, so when I do that, I get 2x cubed. Okay, because again, I can think about this as being x to the first. So 1x times 2x's gives me 3x's in total. Okay, x times a negative 5x is going to give me a negative 5x squared. Okay, x times a positive 8 is going to give me a positive 8x. Then I'm going to take this positive 3 and I'm going to distribute it to each of the three terms in that second pair. So 3 times 2 is going to give me a positive 6x squared. Okay. 3 times a negative 5 gives me a negative 15x. Okay. And then a 3 times an 8 is going to give me plus 24. Let me move that slightly so it fits in the box. So that is the first step where I've multiplied it out. Okay. So now from here, I can combine like terms, okay, to get my simplified answer. So if I look at this and I try to figure out what terms can be combined, okay, I've got an x squared term here and here. So those can be combined. I also have a plus 8x and I have a negative 15x that can be combined, okay? Nothing can be combined with the 2x cubed, okay? So it comes down as is. Then I look at my negative 5x squared plus 6x squared. That'll give me a plus 1x squared. Again, you could write that 1 in front of it. I typically never do. Okay, so just kind of know moving forward, I'm not going to write that 1, but you guys can if you'd like. And then I have my x's that I can combine. So I have an 8x and a negative 15x. So if I combine that, I end up with a negative 7x. Okay, and then I have that positive 24 that doesn't combine with anything, but I'm going to go ahead and bring it down. And that is my simplified answer for this one. So I want you guys to try this next one. And I'm going to give you a hint, okay, because it's written slightly different, where we've got our 3-term thing times our 2-term thing, okay? Typically, I always like to distribute my 2-term thing into my 3-term. So I'll take my x and I'll draw my distribution lines like this, okay, to remind me to do it for each term, okay? So that's the way I recommend doing it. So take a second, try this one, and then I'll pull the answer up in a second. Okay, so if we look at this one, this is what you should have got. So when I took x times, so my x times 6x squared, I got 6x cubed, okay? When I took my x times my positive 2x, I got positive 2x squared. And then my x times my negative 9 gave me that negative 9x, okay? And then I took that negative 2 times each of these terms. So negative 2 times 6 gives me that negative 12x squared, okay? Negative 2 times a positive 2x gives me a negative 4x. And then lastly, negative 2 times negative 9 gives me a positive 18, okay? And then from here, I have some like terms that I have to combine, okay? So the like terms that I combined is I saw I had a positive 2x squared and a negative 12x squared. That's where this negative 10x squared came from. And then my negative 9x and my negative 4x gave me that negative 13x squared. And again, this 18 and this 6x cubed couldn't be combined with anything, so they just got brought down as is. And that is the end of this video and the end of our week 1 videos. So again, reach out if you guys have any questions. Let me know if anything didn't make sense. Happy to help with anything.